The town called it justice. But justice don't usually require a woman to stand barefoot in August dust while good Christian folk decide if she's human enough to keep breathing. Marlene Cutter stood on that platform the way a woman stands for execution, chin up, eyes forward, bare feet pressed into wood gone hot enough to blister. 2 o'clock sun, 100 people watching. Church bells still echoing from the summons that brought them. Thief, someone shouted at first. Then the word spread like fever. Her husband Raymond stood front row playing the wounded saint. Behind him, Pastor Whitmore's face carried that particular righteousness men wear when cruelty and God get confused. She didn't cry, didn't beg. Just lifted her chin higher, like her mother taught her. Pride's the last thing they can take. At the crowd's edge, Cortland Hayes wore a brown wool coat in 105-degree heat. Wore it every day for 6 years, same way some men wore guilt. He watched her refuse to break. That's when his boots hit the platform wood. First step in a long time that mattered. Every head turned. He didn't say a word, just peeled off that wool coat in the middle of August like a man shedding 6 years of cowardice, and laid it across her shoulders while the whole town held its breath. Cortland walked through that crowd like Moses through water, people parting because they didn't know what else to do. His boots on the platform steps sounded louder than the accusations had. He reached for the coat's buttons, fingers steady despite everything. Hayes, don't, someone started. The coat came off, brown wool, too heavy, wrong for every reason except the one that mattered. He draped it across Marlene's shoulders, careful not to touch her skin. Name's Cortland Hayes, he said to the crowd, not to her. This woman's under my protection. The square erupted. You can't. Hayes, don't be a fool. She stole from God's house. Pastor Whitmore stepped forward, Bible clutched like a weapon. Brother Hayes, think of your soul. I have been. Cortland's voice didn't rise, didn't need to. For 6 years. Something in those words made the pastor stop mid-reach. Raymond Cutter lurched forward, face red. You got no right. Sheriff Dawes caught Raymond's arm. Easy now. Cortland turned to Marlene, offered his hand. She stared at it like it might disappear, like every good thing in her life had. 10 seconds of silence. The whole town watching. Her fingers closed around his, calloused palm, rope scars, steady. They walked down those platform steps together. The crowd parted again. Had to. Behind them, the church bell rang. Frantic now, alarm instead of summons. Someone panicking at the bell rope, trying to call them back to judgment. Neither one looked behind. 7 miles to his ranch. 7 miles of silence except hoofbeats and saddle leather. She rode behind him on his mare, both hands clutching that coat despite the heat. Wouldn't let it go. Like if she released it, the whole rescue would evaporate. He checked the horizon every quarter mile. Not casual, systematic, a man expecting pursuit. Why'd you do that? Her voice finally cut the quiet. Cortland didn't answer for maybe 10 seconds. When he did, had to. You don't know me. Don't have to. She went quiet again, tried another angle a mile later. They'll come after you. Let 'em. You'll lose everything. His shoulders moved. Not quite a shrug. Already lost everything. This is just seeing what's left. She didn't ask what he meant. Figured she'd learn soon enough. The ranch appeared through heat shimmer. Adobe house with red tile roof. Cottonwood tree, fighting for life, in all that brown. Barn set back 50 yards like it was ashamed of something. Mountains, purple in the distance. Close enough to see, but too far to matter. He dismounted, offered a hand down. She took it, then immediately stepped back, keeping distance. Barn's got a room. He gestured. Used to be. The sentence died. He cleared his throat. It's clean. She noticed his hesitation. Noticed he wouldn't look at the barn door straight on, only at angles. I'm not asking for charity. Ain't charity. He pulled the saddle off his mare, hands working automatic, closer to penance. The barn room was small. Cot, table, stove that someone had cared for once, east-facing window with faded blue curtains, and things, women's things that hadn't been moved. Hairbrush with long dark hairs still caught in the bristles. Small mirror with a crack through the middle. Tin cup painted with flowers. Marlene didn't ask. Women's ghosts were everywhere in the territories. You learned not to pry. He stood in the doorway, wouldn't cross the threshold. Boots are by the door. Too big, but better in bare feet. She looked down. Her feet were bleeding, hadn't noticed till now. The platform wood had taken its share. I'll bring food. Hour or so. He turned to leave. Wait. He stopped. Didn't turn around. She pulled the coat from her shoulders, held it out. You'll need this. Shouldn't keep it. It's too hot for... Gets cold at night, even when the days burn. He walked back toward the house, and she watched his shoulders tone different. Lighter, somehow. Like putting down weight you'd carried so long, you forgot it wasn't part of your skeleton. Inside the barn room, she sat on the cot, coat in her lap, ran her fingers over the wool, hand-stitched, made with care by someone who'd loved him. Through the small window, she could see him on his porch, standing there, not moving, just breathing like a man who'd been holding his breath for years and finally remembered how. She thought about the crowd, about those 10 minutes before he'd stepped forward, because she'd seen him standing there at the edge, seen him not moving, watched him war with himself while her feet burned and the crowd shouted, and Raymond performed his grief. For 10 full minutes, Cortland Hayes had stood silent. Then he'd moved, and somehow that hesitation, that visible cost, made the rescue mean more, not less. She pulled the coat close. It smelled like dust and coffee, and something she couldn't name. Something like the smell of a promise, 6 years too late, but kept anyway. Outside, the sun dropped another degree toward evening. The cottonwood leaves whispered, and for the first time since Raymond had thrown her to the town, Marlene Cutter let herself believe that maybe, one good man existed after all. Even if he came wrapped in wool and guilt in a decade of silence, even if he'd hesitated, he'd still moved. 3 days in, she'd learned he took his coffee black, checked the horizon every hour like a man expecting war, and couldn't look at the barn without his jaw going tight, which meant whatever ghost lived there was still running the place. Morning came with coffee already hot on the porch rail. He never knocked, never announced himself, just left it there at dawn, like an offering to a god he wasn't sure existed. By day 3, Marlene had stopped pretending she wasn't grateful. You hungry? He stood 10 feet back, respecting distance. Always. Silence. Comfortable enough now that it didn't chafe. More in the pan. He gestured towards the house, then walked back without waiting for thanks. She ate eggs and biscuits on the barnroom steps, watching him work the far fence line. Methodical. Precise. A man who talked to horses more than humans and seemed to prefer it that way. By afternoon, she couldn't stand the stillness anymore. Found him wrestling wire. Need help? Don't need help. Neither do I. She picked up wire cutters. Doing it anyway. His mouth almost smiled. Almost. They worked in silence, her holding post steady while he wrapped wire. Their hands came close twice, both times, both pulled back like they'd touched flame. You know horses? He asked after an hour. I can learn, he grunted. Not quite approval, but close enough. That evening, she noticed. His grammar was rough sometimes. Dropped words where educated folks wouldn't. When she corrected him once, automatic teacher's habit, she caught herself immediately. Sorry. That was true. He shrugged. Never had much schooling. Cattle don't care about grammar. Still, wasn't my place. You're a teacher, not a question. Was. He nodded. Didn't push. Just, coffee's probably cold by now. It was. They drank it anyway. Next morning brought a visitor. Old Apache man riding a paint horse that had seen better decades. He dismounted slow, limped toward the porch where Cortland stood. You finally growing a spine? The old man said in clear English. Or just growing old? Cortland grunted, didn't defend himself. The visitor turned to Marlene, switched to broken English. Me running bear. Bring tobacco, trade. She nodded, caught the intelligence in his eyes. He spoke better than he was letting on. Over coffee, Running Bear watched them both. Said to Cortland in perfect English when Marlene went inside, She's got your wife's kindness. Don't. No, saying it don't make it less true. Cortland's jaw went tight. She's staying till trial's done. That's all. Sure. Running Bear smiled. That's all. Later, Marlene tried to make biscuits. They came out hard as creek stones. Cortland chewed one anyway, jaw working overtime. These are, he struggled. Something. Say it. They're awful. Small pause. Then his mouth cracked, barely, into something almost human. Well, yeah, she laughed. First real laugh since Raymond's betrayal. It felt strange in her throat, like a language she'd forgotten. Cortland's face shifted. Surprise. Then something softer, like hearing music he thought had died. Your mother teach you to cook? He asked. My mother taught me to survive. Cooking was optional. Cherokee? She looked up sharp. How'd you... Running Bear mentioned it, and you got her eyes. He shrugged. Town won't like that. Town don't like much about me. Town's wrong about a lot of things. That night, she woke to sounds in the barn. Footsteps in the aisle outside her room. She pulled the curtain back, careful, just enough to see. Cortland stood in the barn aisle, staring at an empty hook on the wall. Just staring, not moving. His face carved from something that used to be human and forgot how. She understood then someone had died here, hanged themselves, most likely, given that hook's placement in his particular kind of haunted. The woman whose hairbrush still sat on the table, whose curtain still hung in the window, whose ghost he couldn't look at straight. Marlene let the curtain fall, lay back down, heart pounding with the weight of his grief. In the morning, she was gentler, left his coffee cup refilled on the porch without comment, brushed dust from his coat, which she kept folded now on the chair like something precious. He noticed. Said nothing, just nodded once, brief, almost imperceptible. Running Bear returned that afternoon, spoke low to Cortland by the corral. She's healing you. She's just staying here. Same thing. The old man mounted his horse. Sarah would have liked her. Both too good for the men they chose. After he left, Marlene watched Cortland check the horizon again. But this time she understood. He wasn't watching for her danger anymore. He was watching for their danger. The rescue had become mutual without either one saying so. That night she folded the coat with extra care, ran her fingers over the stitching. Someone had loved him enough to make this by hand. Someone he'd failed somehow, and the failure lived in every thread. She pulled it close, breathed in dust and coffee, and 6 years of penance. Tomorrow she'd tell him about Raymond, about the theft she didn't commit, about how marriage becomes prison when you choose the wrong warden. Tomorrow she'd trust him with truth. But tonight, in this barn room where a ghost whispered and a living man kept careful distance, she let herself hope that hesitation wasn't the same as cowardice, that late was better than never, that maybe, just maybe, redemption came in wool coats and bad coffee and the quiet care of a man who'd learned too late how silence kills. By the second week, she'd stopped flinching when he moved too fast, and he'd stopped apologizing for the silence, which is how they both knew it was about to fall apart. Hot afternoon, 107 by the porch thermometer. Marlene working the garden patch, trying to resurrect what looked like Sarah's old rose. Sweat dripping, head swimming. Cortland walked over carrying the coat. She stared at him like he'd lost his mind. It's wool. It's 100 degrees. Not to wear. He draped it over a fence post between her and the sun. To cover. The shade fell across her shoulders. Immediate relief. They worked under it together, her pulling weeds, him turning soil. The coat hung above them like a tent, like shelter, like something other than what it had been. This means something to you? She asked it quiet. The coat? Long pause. Shovel went still. She thought he wouldn't answer. It did. And now? Now it's keeping you from heat stroke. And she waited, hoping for more. He gave her silence instead, but not the cold kind. The kind that meant too much to say, not enough words that work. Later, she found him asleep on the porch. Afternoon heat finally beaten him. The coat draped over his chest like a blanket. She didn't wake him. Just added her own blanket on top. Light cotton, wouldn't smother him. When he woke an hour later, he looked at both covers. Looked at her in the barn doorway, nodded once. Words weren't needed. The exchange was clear. You protected me. I'll protect you. The coat had transformed again. Not burden, not even shield. Something mutual now. Shelter they built together. Evening brought the first real conversation. They sat on porch steps, watching purple crawl across the mountains. Why'd they accuse you? His voice cut the cricket song. Theft. Church collection. $200. Did you? No. Then why'd they believe? Because my husband said I did. Her voice went flat. Dead. His face hardened like he knew that story by heart. You believe me? She turned to face him. Don't matter what I believe. Matters what's true. Something in her chest cracked. Good kind of break, like thawing. She wiped her eyes quick, angry at the tears. Sorry, her voice caught. Been a while since anyone asked what was true. He let that sit, didn't rush to fill space. Then, truth sets you free, or so they say. She laughed, bitter. When's it supposed to start working? They sat with that, shared understanding of betrayal deeper than words could touch. Had a wife once. He said it to the mountains, not to her. Sarah. She waited. Knew pushing would close him up. What happened? Town happened. 2 words. Entire tragedy compressed. She didn't ask for more. He'd given what he could. Running Bear arrived next morning on his paint horse, face grave. Sheriff coming tomorrow, with Raymond. Cortland stood from the fence he'd been mending. She ain't ready. They don't care about ready. Running Bear looked at Marlene. Town demands trial Monday. Want her back. And after he left, Marlene made her decision. Packed her few things that night. Borrowed dress, oversized boots, the coat folded careful. 4 in the morning, she slipped toward the barn door. He stood there blocking it, fully dressed, like he'd been waiting. Where are you going? Anywhere that ain't here. She lifted her chin. I'm not letting you lose everything for me. Already lost everything. 6 years back. And then why risk what's left? He stepped closer. Close enough she could see the war in his face. Past and present, fighting for territory. Maybe what's left ain't worth keeping if I just watch again. The words hit like fists. Watch again. Past failure crystallized in 2 words. What do you mean? But he'd already said more than he meant to. Shook his head. Stay, please. She'd never heard him say please. Didn't think he had it in him. If I stay, they'll come. Could take your ranch. Could let them come. They stood there in barn shadow, dawn starting to break purple gold over the mountains. The coat sat between them on the rail. Both reached for it same time. Hands almost touched. Both pulled back. You really want me to stay? Her voice small. I really want you to live. He picked up the coat, held it out. And you can't do that running. She took it, pulled it around her shoulders, despite the coming heat. They watched sunrise together, charged silence full of things neither could name. Trust, fear, something else that didn't have words yet. Monday, then, she said it firm. I face them Monday. We face them, he corrected. You ain't alone anymore. First time in months, maybe years. Marlene believed that might be true. But underneath the hope, she felt it. Storm gathering. Town wouldn't let this stand. Raymond wouldn't either. This peace was temporary, borrowed time. She pulled the coat tighter anyway. Breathed in dust and coffee, and the smell of a man learning. Too late, but still learning. What standing beside. Someone cost. Tomorrow would bring judgment. Tonight, they had stars and silence, and the fragile hope that late was better than never. That hesitation could be forgiven. That two broken people might hold each other up better than one whole person stands alone. The dust cloud came at noon with the sound of judgment. 6 horses, 5 guns, and 1 lie dressed up as the law. Sheriff Dawes rode in first, 5 men behind him. Town council, mostly property owners who'd voted themselves a posse. Raymond brought up the rear on a bay gelding, too fine for his failing freight business. Cortland stepped off the porch, positioned himself between the riders and the barn. Marlene appeared in the doorway behind him, wearing the coat despite the heat. Hayes. Sheriff nodded, trying for a respectful. Need a word. Say it from there. Dawes dismounted slow, hands visible. Got new evidence. More money missing from the church lockbox. Her fingerprints all over it. There was no lockbox evidence before. Marlene's voice cut sharp. Raymond dismounted too, face arranged in wounded concern. Pure performance. Darling, I didn't want to believe it either. But they found your handkerchief inside. The one with your initials. She went still. You planted, please. His voice dripped sympathy, poison disguised as medicine. You're not well. You need help, not hiding. I'm still your husband. I still care. Cortland's jaw clenched so hard she heard his teeth grind. Sheriff pulled papers from his saddlebag. Formal charges, arrest warrant signed by territorial judge. You're harboring a fugitive, Hayes. She's innocent. That's for the court to decide Monday. Dawes stepped closer. You're a respected man. Don't throw that away for a woman who ain't even yours. There it was. The choice Sarah never got. The moment Cortland had failed 6 years ago. Marlene watched his face. Saw the war there. Every muscle tight, jaw working, eyes measuring cost. 1 second of hesitation, maybe less. But she saw it. Her face closed like shutters in a storm. She stays. Cortland's voice came out rough. Then you're in violation of, don't care, as the town council erupted. Hayes, be reasonable. Think of your property. A man your age should know better. Pastor Whitmore pushed forward on his horse, Bible clutched against his chest. Brother, you're condemning your soul. This woman is... My soul was condemned 6 years ago. Cortland's voice went quiet, deadly. When I stood silent and let you destroy an innocent woman, not doing it twice. The crowd went still. Even the horses felt it. Sarah was innocent. He said her name like a prayer and a curse together. Took you 3 weeks to figure that out. 3 weeks too late. Raymond's mask slipped, just for a second, panic flashing through. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly. You're doing to her what you all did to my wife. The standoff stretched. Sheriff's hand drifted toward his gun, stopped. Nobody wanted to be the one who shot Cortland Hayes. Running Bear arrived then, perfect timing, like he'd been watching from the ridge. His paint horse walked calm through the tension. Got something Sheriff might want to see. The old man spoke clear English now. Dropped the act. Saw Raymond Cutter at the church 2 weeks back. Late night, carrying something heavy. That Indian's lying. Raymond's voice went high, panicked. You can't trust... Got his tobacco pouch, he dropped. Running Bear held it up. Silver initials RC. Sheriff Dawes turned slow. You told me you were home that night, Cutter? I had business. I had to... The lies tangled in his throat. His horse sensed the fear, started dancing sideways. Chaos erupted. Council members shouting. Raymond protesting. Pastor calling for order. Horses circling. In the middle of it all, Marlene stepped forward. I'll go. Cortland turned. No. I'll stand trial. Monday. Her voice carried over the noise. But on my terms. She looked straight at Raymond. You want me in front of that town? You'll get me. All of me. Every truth. Raymond's face went pale. He knew what truths she carried. She reached up, pulled the coat from her shoulders, held it out to Cortland. Thank you for trying. The words landed like stones. Trying, not succeeding, not saving, trying. He took the coat automatic, hands closing on wool still warm from her body. Marlene. You hesitated. She said it quiet, just for him. I saw. It's fine. I understand. That's not... I wasn't... But she'd already turned away, walked toward Sheriff's horse. I'm ready. Dawes helped her mount behind his deputy. The posse reformed, Raymond in the middle now. Protected or guarded, hard to say which. They rode out, dust rising. Cortland stood in his yard holding that coat. Stood exactly where Marlene had stood barefoot 2 weeks ago, platform replaced by dirt, but the abandonment, the same shape. Running Bear dismounted, stood beside him in silence. You spoke up, the old man said finally. Not fast enough. 1 second ain't... It is to her. Cortland's voice broke. Same as 6 years ago. Same goddamn thing. He stared at the coat in his hands. All that weight back, plus hers now too. Double burden, double failure. She saw me hesitate. Thought I was giving up on her. He laughed, bitter. Can't even do redemption right. Running Bear said nothing. Sometimes silence was the only honest response. The sun beat down. The dust settled. The ranch went back to quiet, but it was the wrong kind now. Not peace, just emptiness. Cortland walked to the barn, stood at the threshold he never crossed, stared at that rope hook. I tried, Sarah, he whispered. I fucking tried. But trying wasn't the same as succeeding. And hesitation, even 1 second, was all it took to prove you were still the coward you'd always been. He put the coat back on, full weight, August heat. Penance resumed. The barn room still smelled like her soap and coffee and something he couldn't name. And that's when Cortland understood that saving someone else was supposed to save you too, except he'd hesitated for 1 second, and now she was gone. And he was right back where Sarah left him, alone, with ghosts and a coat that weighed more every year. The coffee cup sat on the porch rail where she always left it. He'd poured it that morning out of habit before remembering she wasn't there to drink it. 2 days since she'd ridden away. Felt like 6 years compressed into 48 hours. Everything she'd touched had a shape now. Negative space where a person used to be. Garden tools propped wrong, his way, not hers. Mended shirt hanging on the line, her stitches visible in the late sun. The barn room door open, showing empty, he couldn't go in. Stood at the threshold like always, like the 6 years before she'd arrived. The rope hook on the far wall caught afternoon light, cast a shadow that looked like a noose, even though nothing hung there anymore. Running Bear found him standing there at dusk. You going to town Monday? Cortland didn't turn around. What's the point? She thinks I failed her. Did you? I hesitated. 1 second. She saw it. Well, 1 second ain't 6 years. Felt the same to her. His voice came out hollow. She looked at me the way Sarah did, that last time. Like, you're really going to let them do this? Running Bear sat on the ground, back against the barn wall. Waited. I wore the coat again. Cortland gestured at himself. Brown wool in evening heat. Put it back on after she left. Felt right, like this is what I deserve. And punishing yourself changes nothing. Keeps me honest about what I am. The old man pulled out tobacco, rolled it slow. What are you? A coward who moves too late. He finally walked into the barn room. First time since Sarah died. Every step cost something. Her scent lingered, soap, sweat, something floral he couldn't name. The hairbrush still sat on the table. Sarah's. He'd never moved it. Marlene had used it, left a few of her dark hairs tangled with Sarah's lighter ones. 2 ghosts in 1 room now. He sat on the cot, head in hands. The memory came whether he wanted it or not. Sarah standing in their bedroom 7 years ago, face pale. They're saying I lay with that preacher, the one who does circuit rounds. That's insane. I know. But they believe him. He says her voice broke. Cortland, I know. Then you'll tell them? Tomorrow, at church? You'll stand up and... He'd looked away. Truth will come out. Always does. But will you speak for me? Silence. His silence. The kind that kills. You're going to let them do this. Not a question. A realization. I'm not letting them do anything. I'm just waiting for proof. She'd looked at him the way Marlene had looked at him 2 days ago, like watching someone you loved become a stranger. 3 weeks later, they found the preacher in Tucson with the church money and another woman. Sent word back Sarah Hayes was innocent. Always had been. Cortland rode to town to tell her. Found her in the barn, rope around her neck, chair kicked over, 3 hours dead, the doctor guessed. She'd waited for him to speak. He'd waited for proof. Proof came too late. He'd cut her down himself, buried her himself, built the cross himself. And every day since, he'd worn the coat she'd made him. Too hot, too heavy, exactly the weight he deserved. Until Marlene. For 2 weeks, the coat had felt lighter. He'd started to believe redemption was possible. Then he'd hesitated. 1 second, and she'd seen it for what it was. Cowardice dressed up as caution. Cortland stood, walked out of the barn room, couldn't breathe in there anymore. Marlene, in town jail. The cell was 8 by 10, wooden bench, bucket, window too high to see anything but sky. Sunday night, trial tomorrow. Raymond visited after dark. The guard let him, husband's rights. This can all go away. He stood outside the bars, face half-shadowed. Say you're confused, sick. I'll drop the charges. We can start over. Why would you do that? Because I'm your husband. I still care. She'd believed that tone once, smooth as creek stones. Now she heard the calculation underneath. You need me silent. What did you do with the church money, Raymond? His face hardened. You don't understand business. The freight company needs money you stole and blamed on me. I was going to pay it back. Defensive now. You're making this harder than it has to be. Get out. He left. She heard his boots on the jail stairs, fading. Alone again, she thought about Cortland. That 1 second hesitation before he'd spoken. She'd judged him for it, called it cowardice. But now, sitting in darkness, she remembered. He'd spent 6 years silent, and when the moment came, despite the cost, despite the fear, he'd moved. Maybe hesitation wasn't failure. Maybe it was just proof the choice mattered. She remembered his words at the ranch. Maybe what's left ain't worth keeping if I just watch again. Watch again. He'd failed someone before, and he'd step forward anyway, knowing he might fail again. That wasn't cowardice. That was the bravest thing she'd ever seen. She'd given him back the coat, told him he'd failed her, when all he'd done was succeed despite being terrified. God, she whispered to the empty cell. What did I do? Running Bear found him at Sarah's grave, an hour past dark. Small wooden cross, desert flowers long dead in the August heat. Cortland knelt in the dirt, coat pooled around him. I know I failed you. His voice broke on the words. Know it every day, every hour. Thought maybe if I helped someone else, someone like you, someone the town threw away. He dragged a hand across his face. But I hesitated. Again, same as before. And she saw it. Running Bear sat beside the grave. Long silence, stars coming out overhead. You know your problem. Tell me. You think 1 second of fear erases 2 weeks of courage? It does to the person watching. Maybe. Running Bear packed his pipe. Or maybe they just need to know what that second cost you. Cortland laughed, bitter. She thinks I'm a coward. She thinks you failed her. Different thing. The old man lit the pipe, smoke drifting. Failing someone means you tried. Cowards don't try. Feels the same from where I'm sitting. Yeah, that's because you're sitting in the dirt talking to a dead woman instead of riding to town. Cortland looked up. She doesn't want to see me. You know that? Or are you afraid that? Silence. Running Bear stood, brushed off his pants. Too late don't mean nothing, Hayes. Just means you got there eventually. And if she don't believe that, then you show up anyway. He walked toward his horse. That's what mercy looks like. Showing up even when you're not wanted. After he left, Cortland sat with Sarah's ghost. The revelation came slow, like dawn, too gradual to pinpoint the moment darkness became light. His guilt wasn't staying silent with Sarah. His guilt was believing silence was the same as waiting for truth. He'd thought, truth will come out. The preacher will be exposed. Sarah will be vindicated. Why make it worse by fighting? But Sarah hadn't needed vindication 3 weeks later. She'd needed one person to stand beside her in the moment. One voice saying, I believe you. You're not alone. The truth had come out. He'd been right about that. But she'd been dead when it arrived. Mercy doesn't wait for proof. Mercy acts on faith. Same with Marlene. He'd hesitated. Not because he was deciding whether to help her. He'd hesitated because he was measuring the cost, checking his courage, making sure he could actually do it this time. And she'd seen the hesitation and thought, he's going to abandon me like everyone else. His real sin, both times, was thinking mercy had to be perfect, had to be fearless. But mercy is fear plus movement, hesitation plus action, the doubt that makes the choice count. You were wrong, he said to Sarah's grave. Not about me failing you. You were right about that. But you were wrong to die thinking you were alone. He took off the coat, laid it on her grave, smoothed it flat. You made this for a better man than I was. His hands shook. But maybe I can grow into it. Maybe it's not too late to become who you thought I could be. He stood, lighter, not because the guilt was gone. It would never be gone. But because he finally understood what to do with it. Tomorrow he'd ride to town. He'd testify. Not to save Marlene. She could probably save herself. He'd testify to show her what that 1 second of hesitation had cost him, to show her he'd moved despite the fear, to prove that late was better than never. That mercy, imperfect, terrified, 1 second too slow mercy, was still mercy. The coat lay on Sarah's grave in the starlight, brown wool on desert dirt. He walked back to the ranch house without it. For the first time in 6 years, his shoulders felt like they belonged to a living man instead of a ghost. Tomorrow, he'd show Marlene what he'd learned too late for Sarah, but just in time for both of them. Hesitation isn't the opposite of courage. It's the proof that courage costs something. Monday morning came the way judgment always does, too fast and too slow at once, and Cortland Hayes stood on his porch watching the sun rise over empty land, trying to remember if courage was something you found, or something you just decided to fake until your legs stopped shaking. He shaved by lamplight, clean shirt from the trunk. Sarah had pressed it 7 years ago, creases still sharp, boots polished with spit and rag until they caught the dawn. Not vanity, dignity. A man going to court, even as witness, not accused, needed to look like his word meant something. His hands shook, buttoning the shirt. He watched them shake, didn't try to stop it. Fear was honest. Pretending otherwise was how you ended up wearing wool coats in August for 6 years. The house felt bigger without her in it, without anyone in it. Just him and the furniture Sarah had chosen, and the silence that had weight now, like something you could drown in if you stayed still too long. He didn't take the coat, left it on Sarah's grave where it belonged, took only his word, his name, his choice to show up. The mare sensed something, kept dancing sideways while he saddled her. He spoke low, steady. "I know, girl. I'm scared too. We're going anyway. 7 miles to town. 7 miles to decide if he was a man or just a ghost pretending." The desert stretched flat and mean under the climbing sun. Nothing but scrub and dust and distance. The kind of emptiness that showed you what you were when nobody was watching. He passed the spot where he'd first brought Marlene away from town. 2 weeks ago. Felt like a lifetime compressed into 14 days. Remembered her silence that whole ride. How she'd clutched the coat and said nothing. How he'd thought she was in shock but now understood. She'd been testing him, waiting to see if he'd speak again or go silent the way men like him always did. Every mile closer, the doubt got louder. What if it makes things worse? What if she don't want you there? What if the town turns on you permanent, takes the ranch, runs you out? Valid questions. The kind that stopped men from doing what needed doing. He kept riding anyway. The mountains sat purple in the distance, solid despite the heat shimmer. That's what he aimed for, not perfection, just solid. Show up solid, that's all a man could do. 3 miles out, he stopped at a ridge overlooking Mesquite Flats. Could see the whole town from up here. Church steeple white against brown land. Main Street cutting through like a scar. People already gathering at the square. Trial was set for 10. He had an hour. Could turn back. Nobody would know he'd gotten this close. Could ride down. Change everything. The choice sat on the ridge with him, past and future dividing the morning in half. He thought about Sarah. How she'd waited for him to speak, and he'd waited for proof. How waiting was just another word for cowardice when someone was drowning. Thought about Marlene saying, "You hesitated, I saw." Yeah, he had. 1 second of pure terror before he'd moved. But he had moved. Maybe that was the point. Maybe mercy wasn't about being fearless. Maybe it was about moving despite the fear. 1 second of hesitation followed by a lifetime of showing up. "Sarah needed me to speak," he said out loud to the empty ridge. "I didn't." The wind carried his words away. "Marlene needed me not to hesitate. I did." The mare's ears flicked back, listening. But maybe showing up late is better than not showing up at all. He remembered Running Bear's words. "Too late don't mean nothing. Just means you got there eventually." And Marlene's question. "When's it supposed to start working?" Talking about truth setting you free. His answer, finally, "When you stop waiting for the perfect moment and start moving in the imperfect one." Truth wasn't just what happened. Truth was who stood with you when you told it. He wasn't riding down there to testify about evidence or alibis. He was riding down to be the witness Marlene needed. To stand beside her the way he should have stood beside Sarah. Not to save her. She'd save herself. Probably already had. To show her what that 1 second of hesitation cost. To prove hesitation and action could exist in the same man. That late mercy was still mercy. If he was wrong, at least he'd be wrong on his feet this time. Wrong trying instead of wrong waiting. The church bell started ringing, calling people to trial. Same bell that had rung for Sarah's funeral. Same bell that had called the crowd to shame Marlene. He'd been outside for both those ringings. Today, he'd be inside. All right then. He touched the mare's neck. Time to see if a man can outrun his own history. He rode down the ridge toward town. Sun climbing, heat building, his shadow stretching behind him on the dust. Proof he was solid enough to block light. The town grew larger. Individual buildings taking shape. People on the street stopping to watch him ride in. Let them watch. Let them see what it looked like when a man, 6 years too late, finally showed up anyway. His heart hammered. Hands still shook on the reins. Sweat ran down his back despite the morning cool. But his mare's hooves kept hitting dirt, rhythm steady as a promise. Late, but here, late, but here, late, but here. The church doors stood open, white paint bright enough to hurt. He could see shadows moving inside. Crowd gathering, taking seats, preparing for justice, or blood, or whatever passed for truth in Mesquite Flats these days. He dismounted in front, tied the mare to the rail, stood there a moment, hand on her neck, gathering himself. "This is it," he whispered. Then Cortland Hayes, coward widower, man who'd learned mercy the hard way, walked through those church doors into the light and the judgment, and the truth he should have spoken 6 years ago, but was speaking now, late. But here, that had to count for something, had to. The church was packed tighter than Easter Sunday, not for God, but for blood. And when Cortland Hayes walked through those doors, still wearing dust from a 7-mile ride, the whispers cut off like someone had slit Sunday's throat, every pew filled, standing room at the back. The church had been converted. Altar moved aside, table set up for the judge, wooden chair for the accused. Marlene stood before them in the same torn dress from the shaming. No coat now, hair pinned up careful, like armor. Pastor Whitmore sat at the judge's table. Territorial circuit judge hadn't made it, so the town's spiritual leader would decide temporal justice. The irony thick enough to choke on. Raymond's lawyer was talking. Handkerchief with her initials, found inside the lockbox. Timeline places her at the church the night. The door opened. Every head turned. Cortland walked down the center aisle, boots on wood, dust rising with each step. Marlene's eyes found his. Shock first, then something harder, the guard going back up. "You're too late. I told you that you failed." He kept walking anyway. "Mr. Hayes," Pastor Whitmore's voice carried warning. "Unless you're a witness, I am." Raymond half stood from his pew. "Your Honor, this man has harbored the accused. His testimony is..." "Then I got a vested interest in the truth, don't I?" Cortland stopped at the front, looked at Marlene. "Ma'am," she nodded, wary, waiting for him to disappoint her again. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Your Honor, I must object." "Overruled," Whitmore gestured. "Let's hear what Hayes has to say. Bible's on the table." Cortland placed his hand on it. Leather worn smooth by 1,000 oaths, half of them lies. "Do you swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but..." "I do." The lawyer circled him like a buzzard looking for rot. "What do you know about the defendant's character?" Cortland looked past the lawyer, looked straight at Marlene. "I know she'd rather starve than steal. That's not evidence. I know she mended my shirts without asking pay, fixed fence without asking help, made coffee for a stranger who didn't deserve kindness." His voice stayed level, steady. "That's character." Murmurs through the crowd, some nodding, some skeptical. Raymond stood. "He's been bewitched by her." "Your Honor, this man..." Cortland turned, slow, met Raymond's eyes. "I know a liar when I see one." His voice went quiet, deadly quiet. "Been living with myself 6 years." The church went silent. "I know what it looks like when a man throws someone to the wolves to save himself." He turned back to Whitmore. "I stood quiet once while this town destroyed an innocent woman, my wife, Sarah, and you could hear breathing now, nothing else. Town accused her of laying with a traveling preacher, said she was unfaithful, unholy." He swallowed hard. "I said nothing. Thought the truth would come out on its own. Thought I didn't need to fight because the facts would speak." His hands gripped the table edge. 3 weeks later, they caught that preacher in Tucson. Had the church money, had another woman, sent word back Sarah Hayes was innocent, always had been. Pause. Let it land. "I rode home to tell her." His voice cracked. "Found her in the barn, 3 hours dead. She'd waited for me to speak. I'd waited for proof." Someone in the back pews started crying, soft. Couldn't help it. "I ain't speaking for Mrs. Cutter's innocence." He looked at Marlene. "I'm speaking for mine. The only way I find it is by standing here now, by being the witness I should have been 6 years ago." Marlene's eyes were wet. She didn't wipe them. "So, when you ask about her character," he turned back to the court, "I'm saying she's got more integrity in her little finger than this whole room combined. And if you convict her, you're making the same mistake this town made with Sarah." He stepped back. "That's all I got to say." Raymond was on his feet, red-faced. "This is..." "Your Honor, he's manipulating..." The back doors opened. Running Bear walked in, slow and steady. Behind him, 3 men from the Territorial Marshal's office. "Got something for the court?" Running Bear spoke clear English now. No more broken act. "Found Mr. Cutter's freight ledgers. Interesting reading." A marshal stepped forward, handed papers to Whitmore. Shows $300 withdrawn from business accounts 2 days before the church theft. Running Bear's voice carried. Shows another 100 in gambling debts to the saloon. Shows a man stealing from his own company to cover losses. Raymond's lawyer tried. Your Honor, these documents are genuine. The marshal cut him off. We've been investigating Cutter Freight for territorial tax fraud. This trial just moved things along. Raymond's face went gray, then white. Then he ran, made it 3 steps before the marshal caught his arm. Raymond Cutter, you are under arrest for theft, fraud, and filing false testimony. The church erupted, shouting, crying, people standing, sitting, not knowing what to do with their mistake. Raymond fought the handcuffs, voice going high. She knew, she had to know. The business was failing and I knew you were weak. Marlene's voice cut through the chaos. Clear, cold. Just didn't know how deep it went. They dragged him out, still protesting, still lying. Whitmore banged his fist on the table. Order, I said order. Took 5 minutes for the crowd to settle. In light of new evidence, Whitmore said, voice tight, all charges against Marlene Cutter are dismissed. The court apologizes for... But Marlene wasn't listening to the apology. She was looking at Cortland. He stood by the witness table, hands loose at his sides, waiting. She walked toward him, slow, the whole church watching, stopped 2 feet away. You came. Yeah. You didn't have to. Yeah, I did. Long silence. The church bell rang outside, noon hour, not judgment, just time passing. I was wrong, she said, what I said before, about you hesitating. You weren't wrong, I did. But you came anyway. Her voice broke. Even thinking I'd turned you away, you still came. He reached into his shirt, pulled out something wrapped in cloth, unfolded it, her handkerchief. The one Raymond had planted. Marshall gave me this. Figured you'd want it back. She took it, fingers touching his. Neither pulled away this time. I got something for you, too. And she opened the small bag she'd carried, pulled out the coat, folded careful, carried through everything. You left this on a grave. But I think Sarah would want you to have it back, not as punishment, as proof you grew into the man she believed you could be. His throat closed up, couldn't speak. She unfolded it, held it out. May I? He nodded. She draped it across his shoulders. But this time it felt different. Not burden, not penance, just good wool, made with love, doing its job. Thank you, she whispered. For standing up, for standing still, for everything. You gave me more than I gave you. How you figure? He touched the coat, felt the weight of it. Light now, finally light. You didn't save me, you reminded me what saving looked like. The healing line, the one that mattered. She smiled through tears. Maybe we saved each other. Maybe. They walked out together. Through the silent church, through the doors, into September light. The monsoon had passed 3 days ago. The air smelled clean, washed, new. Behind them, the church bell rang again. Same bell, different meaning. Ahead, the street opened wide. What now? She asked. Don't know. He looked at her, really looked. What do you want? I want to figure out who I am without Raymond, without this town, without being the woman who stood barefoot in judgment. Fair enough. Might take a while. Got nothing but time. She squeezed his hand, let go. All right, if that's okay. Doors always open. She walked toward the livery stable where her horse waited, didn't look back right away, just walked, head high, steps sure, wearing shoes that fit and carrying nothing but herself. At the stable door, she turned, waved once. He waved back. Then she rode out, east, towards something new. Cortland stood in the street, coat on his shoulders, lighter than he'd been in 6 years. Running Bear appeared beside him. You did good. Did what I could. That's all mercy is. The old man smiled. Doing what you can when you can. They watched her figure grow small against the desert, then smaller, then gone. She coming back? Running Bear asked. Don't know. Maybe, maybe not. No, that bother you. Cortland thought about it, shook his head. She's free. That's what matters. He turned back toward his horse. Had 7 miles home. Cattle to feed, fence to mend, life to live. But this time, living didn't feel like punishment. Felt like possibility. 3 weeks later, the coat hung on a peg by Cortland's door again, and when he passed it each morning, it didn't weigh him down. Just reminded him that mercy, like September rain, comes when it comes, and the only sin is refusing to get wet. The letter came on a Tuesday, not from Marlene, from a town he'd never heard of, 2 territories over. Inside, 3 sentences in her careful handwriting. Found work teaching, small school, good people. The door here opens east, same as yours. He read it twice, smiled, folded it careful, put it in his shirt pocket. She wasn't coming back. Not yet, maybe not ever. That was fine. She was building something new. He understood about building. The coat hung by the door where it belonged. Some mornings he wore it, not as punishment just because September mornings ran cold. Other mornings he left it there and wore something lighter. Either way felt right. Running Bear visited that afternoon, brought tobacco and silence. They sat on the porch watching clouds build over the mountains. "She right?" the old man asked. "Yeah." "She coming back?" "Don't know." "That bother you?" Cortland thought about it, shook his head. "She's free, I'm free, that's enough." "You still alone, though?" "Yeah." He poured coffee. "But it's a different kind of alone. Peaceful instead of punishing." Running Bear nodded. "First time in 6 years you know the difference. First time in 6 years there is a difference." That night, Cortland stood in the barn aisle, looked at the rope hook on the wall. It was just a hook now, metal catching moonlight. Nothing more. Sarah's ghost had quieted. Not gone, she'd always be there, but quiet, resting. "I got there eventually," he said to the empty barn. "Late, but I got there." The wind answered through the cottonwood tree. Leaves, whispering something that might have been forgiveness, or might have been just leaves. He walked back to the house, made coffee for morning out of habit, set 2 cups on the counter, caught himself, put one back, then stopped, left both out. Maybe she'd come in spring, maybe she wouldn't. Either way, the door was open. He pulled the letter from his pocket, read it one more time by lamplight. "The door here opens east, same as yours." His door opened east. Caught the sunrise first thing every morning. Light before heat, hope before certainty. That felt right, too. He folded the letter, placed it on the table. Tomorrow he'd write back. Nothing profound, just glad you found a place. Coffee's here if you need it. Outside, the September night settled cool and clean, stars thick overhead, coyotes singing somewhere distant. Inside, a man lighter than he'd been in years blew out the lamp. The coat hung on its peg in darkness. Just wool, just clothing, just proof that late mercy was still mercy and some promises take 6 years to keep, but keep anyway. Tomorrow would bring cattle and fence mending and the ordinary work of living. Tonight brought peace. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything.